Welcome to Causing the Effect, a podcast focused on the exploration of your mind, body, and spirit.
Christy McCaffrey, I'm going to bring this up. The first thing that kind of popped out to me on your little bio and the work that you did was part of your process of the situation you went through was unraveling the complicated layers of pain and discovering a more authentic space within yourself. What did you mean by that? And give me just more on that whole process, because that really hit me hard with that statement.
Yeah, so I really was speaking to the fact that in 2009, I lost my mom to a rare autoimmune disease called scleroderma. And she was diagnosed in April of 2009, and 5 months later, she died. So it was like this whirlwind of an experience for our family, and we didn't even know what the disease was. And it just was like a really traumatic experience. And for me personally, it was really traumatic because my mom and I were really close. I had walked through the whole process of her illness, even though it wasn't very long, but it was, like I said, very intense with her. And so when she died, I kind of was just left reeling in grief and pain and disbelief. And so I slowly started to find my way through it. Using yoga and meditation were like really big tools that I used to process my grief. And in that process and leaning on those particular tools, I came to this understanding of the fact that there were, beyond just my mom's situation and the pain that was associated with that I had accumulated a lot of layers of pain throughout my life. And I kind of have come to understand that I think all of us have. Just like these little traumas throughout our life, even things that may not seem like a big deal to anybody else, but you internalize them as being traumatic, that they kind of layered on top of each other. And so as I was working through the grief aspect, I started to unearth all these other layers of pain that were there too. And it kind of sent me on this wild personal growth journey where I just made the decision, once I kind of saw it for what it was, that I wanted to heal as much as I could, not just the loss of my mom. I wanted to heal myself, like to the core as best I could, because the more healing that I did, the more freer I felt. And so it kind of just kept me wanting to come back for more and wanting to dig deeper and unearth as much of like my true authentic self as I could. So I hope that answered your question, but that's really what I meant by it.
That did perfectly. And my situation, it's just hitting a chord with me because I've always clung to like a father figure because I never had one. My father entered the witness protection program when I was 6, disappeared. So I grew up with my uncle, who was like my rock and sort of like my father. When I was 23, he got diagnosed with brain cancer, was gone within 3 to 4 months, similar to you.
Oh,
I did not.
Sorry.
No, it's funny because I think that started something that I didn't realize at that point, because you went to the good side. I took the destructive path of like, I'm 24, I have money, I'm going to go and just do the hedonistic pleasure thing. And I got to where you were just by blowing through a ton of money and drugs. So it's a different path, but I quickly realized like the things that give you that quick pleasure and the things that you kind of do for clout or this whole thing, I started realizing I'm living off of like what the culture says is cool and what things I was like, why am I doing this? And you're sitting there on Sunday nights, like crying, like, why am I doing this? And then you go back and do it again. And part of it was a stressful job in a hedge fund, doing all that. So I would just work 80 hours a week. Fridays would come, party, and then cry Sunday and then repeat. It was like thinking about it, it was like a psychosis almost. And then my cousin gave me a book called Mindfulness in Plain English that started me, on this path of becoming the most authentic version of yourself. And everybody listening, thank you for joining us. This is Christy McCaffrey, podcaster, creator, speaker, a little bit of everything. I listen to Be the Good podcast, which is yours. And then you also have the one that you co-created, correct? Called Wisdom Work with Krista?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Cool. So through this authentic version and searching for yourself, like what was the hardest part and what was the most fulfilling part? So two ends to that. What was the hardest part of getting through and then what was the most fulfilling part?
Great question. And I just want to piggyback onto what you just said, because exactly what you explained, I had actually been doing that before my mom died. I was on this loop of like,
me too.
Going out partying with your friends and crying yourself to sleep on Sunday nights, right? And you had like these high levels of anxiety. And I think that was, in retrospect, I can see that was like my true self kind of waving this red flag, like something's not right, and you're numbing, or you're just avoiding, you're looking to all these outside things to give you this deep fulfillment that is what you're really yearning for, but you're not going to get it through that. Right. And so I say, luckily for me, actually, it was my mom's death that caused me to like all that stuff to just blow up in my face in a good way. And I would say the hardest part for me was acknowledging and really owning the fact that I had been untrue to myself for a really long time, in that sense, like that I had put a lot more pressure, or I put a lot of pressure on myself and a lot more importance on, I say this in some of my talks, I call it the VOO, the voice of others, that voice in your head that's actually not really yours, but it's like these conditioned responses because you're either afraid of what the world around you is going to think, or, if you act any different, or if you are truly authentic to yourself, well, but that's not going to really fit, so how do I be here and fit? So the hardest part for me was acknowledging that I had done that for a really long time, that I had turned my back on my true self too many times, and instead given power to the voice of others and to the world around me, put too much importance on that. And it was deeply painful for me to acknowledge that, because you just kind of feel like, whoa, I sold myself out for a really long time. And I didn't mean to, and I didn't know I was doing it. So that became a part of the healing process, was like forgiving myself for doing that, and acknowledging that like we're cultured in a lot of ways to just act certain ways, that are sometimes really untrue to ourselves. But the best part of it was the freedom that started to come in the healing process. So with like each tough aspect of coming to terms with like the parts of myself that I didn't necessarily like, or the ways that I was acting that I wasn't proud of, like that loop of, going out crazy with your friends and then struggling with depression and anxiety through the week and not knowing why, just kind of coming to terms with all of that. But the more that I took it on and then started to kind of undo the habits that weren't healthy or weren't serving me, there was just this like freedom, this like inner peace, I would say, that I was starting to tap into. And I started to realize like, oh, that's what I've wanted all along. All along, that's what I've been looking for. And so once I started to taste it, like I'd say that was the absolute best part of working through the pain. And it remains that way today. On my podcast, Wisdom Work with Krista, Krista and Christy, it's called Wisdom Work with Krista and Christy. Krista and I basically have been friends since we were younger. She grew up here on the East Coast near Philly, where I live now, but she's on the West Coast and has been for like the past 10 years. And her and I just always have gotten into these really deep personal growth conversations, and really supported each other through that. And that is something that we talk a lot about, is that when you do the work on yourself, the inner work, there is just so much inner peace to be found and so much joy that you can unearth within yourself. But the tough part is you have to do the work, and you have to really commit to yourself to heal whatever it is that's coming up for you, and to just acknowledge it.
Exactly. Well said. And I've had, there's a lot, I would say that there's more young guys listening to this stuff than I would have expected, but they try to ask me like, what does that mean, freedom? Like, what do you mean? You don't get it. You have money. And the best way I could describe this is, for me, like the other attributes that come with the freedom is perception and awareness. I feel like my awareness has become to a level, it's like, you just kind of see what reality is. And that could be the shaman in me. That could be that deeper kind of study of the Eastern philosophy, but actually seeing like what actually is going on in the world within myself. Like it's so underrated that when you start searching and start like searching the depths of yourself, that the world becomes clear in a way. And the perception just changes. Like there's no, and it's not like a gigantic shift that happens one day. It's almost just like it happens over a period of time doing the work, and you don't even realize it until you look back. Like I have a journal. I was looking at what I was saying like 2 years ago. I was like, holy shit, like this is crazy. And I think that's the best part of this whole spiritual world of personal development. It's like we all have this overarching arc for good, but how you get there is kind of your journey. It's like, I'm a big meditator, and I would say I like the mysticism of the spirituality of the Eastern philosophy books and Tibetan Buddhism. That's what gets me going. Personal development, I think that's where people put their foot in the thing and realize, like, I wanted to add things to me. So I wanted to be fearless and be like this guy. And now I'm just like, I just want to be peaceful and have harmony. And it's like, it's just funny how, you think you want that, and then as you evolve, it changes kind of that star that you're searching for. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, totally. And I think that you explained that very well. And I would totally agree with just the aspect of freedom, and what that really means is that you do just get this more clear perspective of yourself and your life and everybody in it. And I have found recently that it's been this amazing experience of realizing that I care so much less about how the world around me perceives me the deeper I get into my own spiritual journey, because you're starting to just really build up this solid foundation within yourself, and using your spiritual practices or whatever it is that you use to like center yourself allows you to get this like bird's eye view of yourself and your life. And then like you said, like everything becomes different, and you realize like, oh, so much stuff that used to stress me out, or the things I would worry about, or it just doesn't even matter. Like it actually doesn't matter. And I think you just get this new awareness, was a really good term for it. It's a shift in your awareness and a shift in your perspective.
Yeah, when I'm talking to these young guys, I try to use football as the analogy. Like, imagine being a quarterback that you could see everything. That's what it feels like. It's not only with spirituality, it's like with business, with friends. Like, you get to see and maximize your opportunities that you would otherwise just be kind of pigeonholed. And for me, there's something about, I've been trying to understand the way people look at the world, and like it helps you understand other people better, because some people look at the world from a physical standpoint, some people look at it from an economical standpoint, some people look at it from a psychological standpoint, and it's just easier to kind of relate to people. Now you brought up an interesting thing with the worrying about what people see you as or whatever. Was that a big issue for you? And what kind of work did you do to get through that? Because that's still something I would say it's still an issue with for me, letting go of this identity of being the financier, Scott, and having this job with money and putting on the suit and like all that nonsense has been like a struggle for me. There's like the podcaster Scott, and then there's that kind of day job Scott. Like, how did you deal with that whole thing?
Yeah, I would say it has, looking back, if I'm being honest, it's been a huge issue for me from like my early teens on. And I think I'm just starting to understand why it was such a big issue for me. And it's because I think actually there's people in my life, or people who have known me, who would be surprised to know that I've cared what other people think, because I don't think I put that off. I'm a very confident person. I'm a very independent thinker, and I always have been. But I think ever since I started doing the things that I do now, like the podcast, and I'm doing a lot of writing, and I'm just kind of putting my truest self out there in a way that I have never done prior, that I'm just starting to realize like, oh, okay, I think I was so scared about how people were going to perceive me, because this is who I wanted to be. This is who I wanted to be more vocal about, personal growth or spirituality. I wanted to be more vocal about how can we focus on doing good things? How can we talk about making an impact in the world, right? And I was just so concerned with how I would be perceived, because most people around me weren't talking about those kind of things. And so that was a really deep struggle for me. But I will say that once I started it started with Be the Good, my first podcast. So I'm now 3 years into that. Actually, I shouldn't say that. It started with my nonprofit. So I started my nonprofit about 10 years ago after my mom died, and we create documentary videos to raise awareness for the disease she died from. It's called Scleroderma, and the nonprofit's called Project Scleroderma. And I had to start putting myself out there for that, because I was in our first documentary, and then I became like the face of this organization, and I was asked to speak in on a lot of big stages globally. I was asked to go places, and I had to start to get comfortable with putting myself out there, right? And just like really speaking from this authentic space. And that was tricky. But then once I started Be the Good a few years ago, that was the first time I really was like, I'm going to be like 100% me, right? And that, when I felt what that felt like to really put myself out there and talk about whatever I wanted to talk about, That's when I started to realize just the value in showing up more authentically as yourself. As you said, like I had that same identity issue of like, you're saying like, I'm Scott who wears the suit during the day, and then I'm Scott the podcaster at other times. And for me, I was a hairstylist from like 15 to 30. Then my mom died, and I somewhere around like 25, 26 started this nonprofit and was still doing hair, and had built a really successful hair career as a stylist. But then decided, okay, I think I want to go closer to this nonprofit space, because that's what I really feel. But having to explain to people like, oh, so you don't do hair anymore, now you're this. And it would give me so much anxiety, because I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm a director, I'm a producer, like, I guess that's what I am, and then moving into the podcast world, like then I have to start saying I'm a podcaster, and I'm, so it's tough, because I think like society wants us to pick a lane and stay in it. And that was the trickiest part for me, because that's just not my personality. If I'm being my most authentic self, I have a bunch of different hats on. And I love that about myself. And I love that about like where I've landed now, is that like, I'm a mom and I'm an entrepreneur, and no, I can't really give you a 1-word answer for like what I do. And so it's tricky because we feel like we need to define ourselves in such a specific way, but I have found more freedom personally by shying away from that and not feeling like the pressure to have to say, this is who I am. And so now I don't worry so much about what everybody else thinks, because I have learned how to truly accept who I am, what I'm about. And it's all right if everybody else doesn't get that. If what I do, juggling all these balls in the air, looks like nonsense to anybody else, like that's all right, because I'm enjoying it.
Christy, you're just you're like hitting everything I'm dealing with right now. I'm like 10 years behind you in the situation. Because imagine like the tough kid from Brooklyn, Italian, doing the whole thing. This is the issue I'm having. And because I know what you're talking about with the hairstyles, because I built this company 6 years ago. Where it's like, well, Christy, you built the successful hair. Now you should have stopped doing that. What are you, stupid? And I'm like, yeah, that's the fun part. It's like building, but then there's something about the restart of starting from like zero, and just like, can you actually, and I guess with the podcast is really what gets me, because if you took like values of what feels so good to me, right? I would say the hedonist side is like getting the bottles and making out with a girl, but like this conversation is just above that. It's like even better, because it's like, this is what makes me happy. And then when you have the emails and like have all these people reach out to you, like being able to truly like, just not like we're making gigantic, but like a little drop in a pond. If each of us do that, then all of a sudden we're going to need help. And I think it's clearer than ever, especially this week for everybody listening. It's the last week in May, shootings galore this week. I was, I don't know if you heard in Philly about the shooting in New York that happened about 6 weeks ago. There was a shooter on the train. He killed six or seven people. I was on that train. So I was there. My God. I wasn't in it. I was all the way in the back, but like, it just puts everything into perspective. Like and I see people talking about gun law, nothing to do with gun law. It's about the mind and what's going through people's like heads to even get themselves to do it. And a lot of it's mental health. And I know they turned in New York, at least a lot of the mental health places into COVID places, and there's a lot of nonsense there, but there's clearly something going on. And I was looking at the numbers of the shootings in the last 5 years. There's like 188 school shootings in New York, and the second most country is England with 8. So it's clearly something going on in America. And that just scares me. Not like, I can only imagine how you feel like with the kids, but like just for what is going on and like, what are we doing? And I really strongly believe that whatever the work we do, call it personal development, call it spirituality, call it authenticity, like we need to all do this together. I don't think there's going to be like a Joe Rogan, like we had the Jay Shetty and all that, but it's all of us going together and just like dropping these little pebbles together to make like a wave that people could wake up and go, well, yeah, maybe you need to get off the phone for a little bit and not just go right to it and text and emails, and, maybe turn off social media at night from a certain time, because there's a lot of angst. And I don't know what it's like in Philly. I'm sure it's the same thing, but in New York, it's like, it just feels dangerous and it feels weird. And not that I'm nervous to go on a train now, but like now you have to keep your head up on the train and, keep your eyes open and all that stuff.
I think you're absolutely right that it's like this growing energy, and not in a good way in terms of that kind of stuff. And that absolutely something needs to be done. And I can't even tell you, speaking from a mother's perspective, what this week has been like, saying goodbye to my kids and putting them on the school bus and dropping my little guy off at preschool. Like, a mom leaves that situation and cries her way home thinking, I have no idea if something like that's going to happen to my kid. And it's awful. It's just something definitely has to change. But in terms of like us collectively, I think you're absolutely right, and that is exactly why I started Be the Good. Because at that time we were just in like the the highest points of division, I feel like, politically. I don't think it's gotten a lot better, but it was at the point when things were really starting to ramp up is when I started that podcast. And I am not someone who likes to dive into politics that much at all, but I just felt like, what can I do to put, like you said, my little drop in the bucket? If I put my attention on the good and I, try to call other people's attention to the good, then I feel like I'm doing something, right? Because you can start to feel so helpless in these times, whether it be the political divide or whether it be like all these insane, violent things that are going on. You're absolutely right. I think it's all about us choosing to do something, not just sit there and feel like it's too much, nothing's ever going to get better, this is awful, and we just have to deal with it. No, I think that each of us has to choose some way to put your drop in the bucket so that absolutely, like you said, that wave can start to happen, because we do have these great leaders, right? Like Jay Shetty, and I love him and I love his podcast.
Yes.
People that are, he inspires me, right? He inspires you, which is awesome. But then you and I have to do something to inspire our audiences in hopes that they do something that will inspire other people around them. And that's how we shift the energy of our entire society, I think. And that's where I find comfort in these crazy times, is knowing that I'm doing my part. I know that nothing that I do individually is necessarily going to make a significant like earthquake of an impact. But if I take care of my little piece and I inspire other people to jump on board and do their piece, then that's when we really can make a monumental shift.
Yeah. And I think there's something about like the conditioned mindset of people that are not even aware of what we're talking about, right? There's people just walking around, and I would say there's two people that I've met in life. They're the people who kind of dance through life, try to be positive, and I would say call them glass half full. And then there's the people who are glass half empty, that are more like, those people just a little stuck in their ways. And it's fine to be that way. But when that negativity starts turning into almost a nihilism, because I'm trying to put my mind in, I've been trying this week, like understand, like, how are you an 18-year-old kid going in, like, what are you thinking? And I think they're thinking the exact opposite of everything you're saying, of nothing matters. And that is the beginning of something that terrifies me, because I'm so surprised at how much of a help it is to all the young guys listening. Thank you. And all that stuff, I love you. But like how like easy it is to help a little, like a young man who just needs a pat on the back or something. For me, I guess they connect with me more. That's who I seem to help a little bit better. But like, it's just so surprising to me. And even I go through, but I think that's why I want to do all this stuff, because I never really had that pat on the back. My mother was more old school, like, perfection is the key. And if you're not perfect, it doesn't matter. And I think we have to kind of let this black and white thinking is in politics, in the world, and you need 100. No, if you get 90, that's great. Like we have to just loosen up on this. And I think social media and the news, like, they've been taking advantage of this for the clicks, and it's not working. Like, this whole situation does not get us where we need to be as the most powerful country, the best country. Because I think from a political standpoint, we're a joke. From an education standpoint, like, we're top 15, can't be top 15. Like, it's not that hard. This stuff starts with educating people. And I don't know how you feel about the education, because you have the kids, but I hope that they're teaching them the stuff they should be learning, at least. I don't know.
Yeah. I weigh less heavy on grades and more heavy on exactly what we're talking about, actually. And my kids are little, they're 8, 7, and 4, but I have some pretty like deep conversations, especially with like my 8 and 7-year-old, where I think that's what's going to make the difference in our culture moving forward. And this is a really important point I want to make, because I talk about this a lot with our Wisdom War conversations, Krista and I, listen, what her and I were talking about was so woo woo and like left field 10 years ago that we couldn't even have these conversations. And I'm really excited that now people are seeking me out to have these conversations, and they're like, don't think it's weird. So in that way, I think we're headed in the right direction. Yeah. But as far as my kids, I say, if you as the adult aren't doing your own work on yourself, or aren't tuned into like, how can I be a better person and make the world a better place, then your kids are missing that, but if you do it, then I lead by example to my kids. So I want them to see that I am doing something in the world in some or many ways that's making an impact in the lives of other people in a good way. And then I jump into these conversations with them about why that matters. And why does it, like my son had said to me one day, like, why do I always have to be the nice guy? Cause I'm always driving into his head, like, be kind. Like, I don't care what that person said. Like, you be the bigger person and you be nice, you be kind, whatever. Not like, don't let people walk all over you by any means. But, and I said, because it really matters. I know you're not going to get that right now, but it does really matter that you be true to yourself, but be a good person, treat people well, go out of your way to do something for somebody that might make their day better, even if it's like the slightest little thing. But so I think it's that example, it's setting the example. And even if you're not a parent, like setting the example for your peers. I think that in many ways, it was so scary to me to step in to be the good and put myself out there like all this, because I thought my peers are going to be like laughing at me. But what I found was the opposite, is that people were like yearning to have deeper conversations. People were yearning for a positive outlet and to hear stories about good stuff. And now what Krista and I are talking about was very scary for us to put that out there, because we're like, we're the woo-woo weirdos. Like, no one's going to want to hear what we have to talk about. And the opposite's happening. We have women coming to us saying like, I need this. I've been craving this kind of like deeper conversation, and I couldn't find it anywhere else in my life. And so they tune into our podcast once a month and they're like, I feel like you're my friends. I feel like seen and heard and all. So I just think, and for you, like what you're doing with a younger generation of guys is incredible, especially for men, because I think just oftentimes men are afraid to have conversations about anything that's opening up with your emotions or like spirituality or anything like that. But when you do that, they see that and they're like, oh, okay, it's cool. It's normal. That's normalized.
It's crazy how many, I would never think, because usually when I started this, it was like a lot of women, like the typical, most spiritual things are women. I was like, that's cool. Let's do that. And you start talking more about, like, I was just getting more authentic because I was like, just being me and trying to figure this whole thing out. And for me, being I'm the right side thinker. I could do things and we could but that emotional side is tough for me. It's like, I feel like I'm just starting to have feelings and all this stuff. So it's good to like, and there's a mix of the emotional side, but also with men, or even people in general, I want to say men, people just bearing responsibility. And I think our parents, at least my mom, made it too easy on me. I'm a spoiled brat. That was the way it was. And it's been it wasn't firsthand nature for me to like be a hard worker and do the extra, go the extra mile. And I think a lot of men in my family, and at least here, you expect things to get handed to you. And it's like, you're handed nothing. Every day you have to kind of wake up. And like, I look at every day as like, there's a clean slate and you have to earn it every day. For me, it's meditating, working out, and then doing, kind of giving with the best footprint that I could,
Yeah. And I think that speaks really well to personal growth and authenticity. So lots of people can sometimes just, get caught in this loop of like everything negative happening in their life is somebody else's fault, or anything that they're not happy with is because something didn't go their way, or, whatever. But if you can take accountability for yourself and start to really look inward instead of looking outward, and take some responsibility for like the ways that you maybe need to grow, or the ways that you maybe could shift your perspective, right? When you're able to do that, then like your entire life starts to shift. And so I think it's just so awesome that you're giving that example to anybody that's listening to you, to say like, hey, this isn't easy for me and I'm working through it. And like the emotional stuff still feels tricky. And even just saying like, I can admit I was spoiled. I was, I didn't have to take as much responsibility.
I'm still spoiled. My mother's bringing me avocados as we speak. This is the life I live in. This is the life.
That's awesome.
I have to literally tell my mom, like, stop doing things for me because I got it. I need to figure out how to do the laundry. Mom.
But that's great because that's such self-awareness. And so you're speaking to that, and you're speaking that into these other people that are listening to you, especially young males. Like, that's just so important for you to say, all right, I've recognized what's happening and now I'm going to do what I need to do to kind of like start to shift things. Exactly. But yeah, cool. I love talking about this kind of stuff. I could talk about it for hours.
Christy, this has been such a nice like, they're always nice, but like, this was a good one. So just thank you so much, everybody. Of course, everybody on YouTube watching, hit the like, the review, all of the nonsense you got to say. Just keep listening and just, listen to Christy's podcast, Be the Good. I'm going to put all the notes below for everybody listening to us. Actually, Christy, this is the 2-year anniversary of Causing the Effect today. So thank you, everybody.
Gosh.
Yes, you are the 200th episode, so this is a big deal.
Oh, I'm so excited. So congratulations
to me. We'll celebrate a little bit. Everybody who's just been with me this journey, thank you guys so much. From 300 people listening a month to 30,000, it's like, I love this shit. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Christy. That's it, everybody. So stay safe, stay positive, stay blessed. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.